Hello everybody, this is Dr. Novak again. Welcome to my channel if you're new here. I wanted to bring up something that I went looking and preparing for the video on the 90-gallon tank, and I must have thousands of books. Whether the books are on bacteria, whether the books are on fish, plants. And I thought, well, I'll look at some of my plant books to get the names of some of the plants that are in the aquarium and correctly get the names of what they are so I can let you know out of my plant books. So one of my plant books, which is over 36 years old now. So the book is older than probably a lot of you are that are even watching my channel. It was written by, it was put out by Tetra, and Barry James is the one who wrote the book. But it's a German book because it was put out by Tetra. And it's about aquarium plants. So when I started looking at this old book, this 36-year-old book, one thing I was looking at, which I found interesting, you got to remember 1986. Let's go back about 1986. In about the year 1984 or so, mini reefs were coming out. The wet-dry filter was hitting the market, was becoming a big thing. Mini reefs were out. We could finally keep invertebrates along with fish, and this was a big thing. We also must remember during this time the Undergravel filter was being phased out. People now were putting their substrates directly on the bottom of aquariums. So they were losing favor, but you have to also remember during the same time, undergravel filters, as per se, were being misused because manufacturers had advocated that you use high-powered air pumps with air stones, or during that time, they were even going with pumps. And a lot of your circulation pumps were designed to fit on undergravel filters. And they would fit on them. And I remember some of them pumping as much as 400 gallons an hour were made to fit on undergravel filter tubes. They're 1-inch tubes. So this is what happened to undergravel filters. By the time the 80s came around, we were pumping hundreds of gallons an hour through the substrate during that time, during the 70s and the 80s, especially when they came out with pumps. But by this time, the whole hobby was changing. And because they were moving water so quickly through the substrate, the big problem became, as they all were advocating back then, it was a mechanical sink for detritus and everything else, fish waste, detritus, dead leaves, or whatever. And it would be sucked into the undergravel filter. And they said it was becoming a mechanical filter. It was a big hassle, which by that time, the Python had come out, or Aqua undergravel filter cleaner, where you just had a tube and connected up to your faucet and you can clean your undergravel filter. So it really wasn't a problem, but it was made into a problem. In other words, we turned a mountain out of a molehill. We made something that was nothing into something bigger than what it really was. For those of you who don't understand that terminology that we use in the United States, making a mountain out of a molehill. And so when this book was written, undergravels were being phased out, and wet-dry filters were a big thing, which, as you see today, nobody really uses wet-dry filters. So even they went by the wayside. But back then, it was the big thing. And I remember Ehi actually made an aquarium where you could buy the aquarium, stand and everything, and it had a wet dry filter built into the bottom of it. It was all in one kind of thing when you bought it. Okay, those days are long gone. Anyhow, I was looking at this book, and this is a German book, and I wanted to read you a little excerpt out of the book. It's about plants, so of course the whole book is geared towards planted aquariums and how you set it up. And here it is, before adding the gravel, and back then in the 80s and 70s and 60s, basically we used gravel, small gravel in diameter, anywhere between 1, 3, 4 millimeters in diameter, and that's what we used. But we added another substrate to it, or an additive to the gravel, because you know the gravel is inert. Where today we have things like ADA, and we have the fluval substrates and other aqua substrates that we can add. Back then, they really didn't have any of that. So it says, before adding the gravel, always wash it in running water. Place a quantity of gravel in a bowl and run the water from the holes until the batch is clean. Repeat the process with further batches until all the gravel has been washed. Okay, that's we still do that today, not a problem. It is surprising how much gravel you need to provide reasonable looking layer for the minimum ideal depth of 7.5 centimeters, which is about 3 inches. Now remember, this was written in 1986. At the back, and sloping to 5 centimeters or 2 inches at the front. Now, this is something that people really don't do much today, but they're recommending at least 3 inches, and then 2 inches in the front and 3 inches in the back. Does this kind of sound familiar? I'll get back to that later on in the video. Let's see. Let's see, sloping at the front. You will need 6.4 kilos or 14 pounds of gravel per 900 centimeters or 1 square or 1 foot square of floor area. So it's kind of telling you you'll need about 14 pounds of gravel per square foot of aquarium bottom. Before putting the gravel in the tank, you may wish to incorporate a suitable growing medium. See page 28. Also consider the installation of any filtration and or heating system. See page 18 to 20. Once these arrangements are completed, add the washed gravel carefully to the tank, sloping it as desired. Plant it and left this like this. Plant it and left like this. The action of gravity and rooting fish would soon reduce such a carefully constructed slope into a uniform plane. So planted and left like this. Yeah, the action of gravity and rooting fishes would soon reduce it. Okay, like I said, this is written in Germany, so the transfer over to English is a little funny for us, but you get the point. What they're saying is you would slope it, but in time, all through the aquarium, you would at least have 2.5 inches of substrate. Okay, when we did Undergravel Filters, they would recommend the same thing. You would have at least 3 to 4 inches of substrate. So let's move on to page 28, because they recommend using a additive substrate. So let's go on to page 28. Gravel additives, and that's what it's talking about. Now, I'm going to read this for you. And remember, this is 36 years ago. This was written. The iron-rich clay soils found in some tropical areas. Does this sound familiar? Often imparting a reddish color to the bed of stream and pools, can be especially valuable in promoting lush plant growth. The iron compounds dissolve from such soils and combine with organic acids produced by the plant roots. This organic iron is not only more easily absorbed by the plants, but it also enables other trace elements the soil contains and which are normally locked up in the stable compounds to be released and made available to the plant growth. I'm just quoting you what's in the book. Does that quote sound familiar of what I've been saying? When you make a plenum and aquarium, in which we found out that people making these deeper substrates, and if you watch some video, people are making substrates even shallower, because back then we used gravel and not sand, because sand always caused problem with anaerobic conditions and turned the sand black underneath where it was. But here they're telling you 36 years ago about iron, how important iron is for the plants, how the iron can be released to the plants so the plants can grow. I've been saying this all along, haven't I, on my videos, to use a product called laterite. Other people have asked me, well, there's other products that have iron in it, which are good products also. But some way, somehow, you have to get iron to the roots of the plant. And if you remember some of my videos, I even made mention that iron was the #1 trace element that is needed by plants, more than nitrogen that some people thought, and more than phosphates or phosphorus. Okay, it is the #1. It is what we found out that will grow plants nice, red, big, and beautiful, adding iron. Well, here it is, written by the Germans from Tetra on iron. Let's see, several commercial products, substrates, additives incorporate such iron-rich clay in their formation. Using these additives is simply a question of adding a material to about 75% of the wash gravel and using the remaining gravel as a top cover. So this is exactly what is said in a book written in 1986 of how to keep plants. And how did this change? Why did it change? Why did everything become different? It worked then and it works today. But today we know a little bit more on the science of when we make a plenum, we have fluids move. And these trapped trace elements that are in there that the roots are now able to break down are able to grab these elements out of the aquarium. We know that today. Today we are using different substrates. We're using substrates, like I said, the ADA, the Fluvo, other brands that already are enriched substrates. So all we need to do is add iron to that. Iron plays 2 parts, as you've been watching my videos. Part 1, it's for the plants. Part 2, it's for bacteria. Believe it or not, bacteria use a lot of iron in the initial stages of growing. So it's twofold of how important iron is. As I said, you could use the kitty litter and soak it in iron, and then after that you could pull it out of the iron, and then you could place it wet in the aquarium and then cover it up with your substrates and stuff like that. If you can't find a laterite, that would be another option. Soak the kitty litter and then pour off the iron that is in it. The kitty litter is going to be wet, of course. It's going to soak up that iron in the kitty litter itself. And then when you put it on the bottom, a thin layer, a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch of the kitty litter or baked clay, whether you're using kitty litter or whether you're using oil dry or safety zorb or one of the other products. And even then with these products, a person who actually works for, I think he works for safety zorb, I could be incorrect. He actually told me there's a difference between the products between East Coast and West Coast, how they're made, how they're baked. I mean, he works for the company. He actually told me that you're not going to get the same from coast to coast. It varies. So this is why we're coming up with different kitty litters. But the good news is, even those kitty litters that I've got from Walmart, which are softer and they haven't been baked, they still will work okay. But people say, well, they turn into a mush, you know, like a mud substrate. Well, what do you think mud turns into when you use that in your aquarium? Dirt, you know. It also turns into a mud substrate. But anyhow, the kitty litter will turn that, but it will have absorbed the iron. And then it will help the bacteria and root system. It's a kind of messy. I would prefer to use a iron source like laterite because it's cleaner. You put a little kitty litter down, sprinkle your laterite all over the kitty litter, you know, and then you fill it for your substrate or whatever you're doing. Now, in my 90-gallon, if you watch the video, I did not use any kitty litter in the plenum. And I did that on purpose. I wanted to show you that kitty litter is not that important when you're making a plenum versus if you're making a BCB basket. And that's because you can use a substrate of your choice, like ADA or Fluvo. Then after you build up so much, put a layer of your laterite, sprinkle it on, and then finish it up and put your gravel, if you're using a gravel, on top of that to hold it down, which is what I did, and make it at least 3.5, 4 inches. I made mine completely even because I know after time, the book is absolutely right. It will even itself out just from gravity, fish, plants, and everything else. So why slope it? That's just me. Anyhow, people will slope their gravel, and that's perfectly fine. That's why I did it. The only difference between what this book is saying, written 36 years ago, and what we are doing is we are making a plenum. And underneath the plenum, we have a void. And then we are moving fluids through that void so fluids can move through the substrate. But we also know we can't move fluids too fast like they did back in the 70s and 80s, you know, at 400 gallons an hour or 150 gallons an hour. We know we can't move fluids that fast through a plenum because we are trying to move fluids very slowly through the plenum. We are not trying to make anaerobic conditions. We are trying to make anoxic conditions, okay? There's a difference between anaerobic and anoxic. Assimilatory denitrification and dissimilative denitrification, which has already been explained in my videos. So that's what we're trying to achieve. Now, in both tanks that I have set up, which I've set up the goldfish tank, which I did use a little bit of clay in the bottom of that aquarium, along with laterite, to help feed bacteria and to help any plants that were growing. And in the 90-gallon, I use no kitty litter at all. So a lot of people ask me, I can't find kitty litter. Don't worry about it. If you're making a plenum, you don't really need. Use the substrates you want to use, but at least try to get some iron in there if you can. Humanly possibly can. Through the whole time the 90-gallon has been set up, the main, I would say 99%, think about that, 99% of the additive I've been adding to the aquarium is iron. That means 1% is other trace elements. 99% is iron. Iron is added every single day. The dosing pump turns on. The iron is being added to the aquarium every single day, several times a day. It's been diluted because it's in a 5-gallon reservoir where when the tank goes down, it refills itself. But that iron is being added every single day. That is the most important trace element. That's why the tank is doing so well. Not because I'm squirting in little squirts and overdoing it with nitrogen and I'm overdoing it with phosphates. No, 99% of what I add to this aquarium is iron. Every week I do a water change. People say, well, why do you bother doing the water change if the filter doesn't need a water change? I have told people, it depends on your whole system. I do a water change of 10 gallons. It's very easy. It takes a few minutes. I do not disturb the substrate. I don't really do anything more than pull water out and put fresh water in. And that's because Florida water, along with Chicago water, has a lot of calcium in it. It's very hard. It's good for snails. It's good for the plants, and has other trace elements in it and micronutrients in it that we as humans don't really see, but goes back into the tank. It gets replenished that way. I haven't had to really mess with all these bottles of, what can I say, fertilizers. Never had, the biggest fertilizer I put in there is iron. That's it. That's the main thing. And my plants aren't rotting. They're not dying. I don't have a crip rot or anything like that. And they're growing just fine, profusely. And of course, the biggest thing, as we all understand, CO2. With it, you're going to have very good plant growth. Without it, your plant growth is going to be very slow, except for some plants will grow good without it, like hornworth or some of those stem plants that don't need as much CO2. They do just fine. Like in the goldfish tank next to me. This is hornworth. The goldfish eat it. It's growing. You can see it's growing. I use a lot of light in this goldfish tank just to grow algae and to help grow the hornworth that's in there. However, I wanted to just read this short video. Here's a book that is basically, here it is, 36-year-old book, basically telling you the same thing I am telling you. The only difference is you're using a plenum versus putting it at the very bottom of your aquarium. When did things change where we started making big, huge substrate bottoms? When did things change where we exchange iron and substituted dirt? And that's going to turn into mud. When did we change, and why did we change? Just because? Did it have any scientific merit to it? We know that, yeah, if you do use dirt and you lock it in somehow and the roots can get to it, yeah, there's going to be a lot of fertilizer there, because what the dirt is doing is substituting for fertilizer tablets. That's all the dirt is basically doing. Unless your dirt has a lot of iron in it, which most dirt does not have that much iron in it, it will have other nutrients in it, much like fertilizer tablets. So basically, you're adding dirt instead of fertilizer tablets. Okay, that's basically what you're doing. And once the roots can hit the dirt, yeah, they're going to start growing because you have a lot of nutrients in there that the plants can utilize, just as it's said in here. But 36 years ago, it was basically iron and basically your gravel. So where it changed and why it changed, I don't know, but it changed. Anyhow, if you think that plenums are something that are new anoxic filtration system is something new. It isn't. When this book was written 36 years ago, that was the same time period I was actually doing research for the government on clay. And that was the same time I started doing research on the anoxic filtration system. The anoxic filtration system was already being researched at the same time this book was written. And by 1989, the cat was let out of the bag, I should say. I did not bring the anoxic filtration system out to the public. It was somebody else who actually started talking about it on forums and then kind of asked me if I'd come in and start talking about it because people became curious about it back in 1989, 1990s. But the research was already being done. So it was being done over 30 plus years ago. So it's nothing new. Just like this book is nothing new. It's old news. Why is it being treated with such discontent today? Well, not trying to make this video too long, but my thoughts on it are people don't care if you fail. And if you think about it, it's a money thing. People really just don't care. Back in the 80s and 70s, you would go to an aquarium store and you could find tons and tons of plastic plants. Live plants were there, but I don't remember a lot of people who had aquariums using live plants. A lot of plastic plants were being used. Today, if you come today, you don't see that many plastic plants. They really don't look real. You would think with technology, plants would look almost like a real plant. Basically, what do you see? Live plants now have taken hold of everything. Now it's live plants and fish. So you have a new part of the hobby that's opened up. You have one where plastic plants have went by the wayside and live plants have taken over. So there's a market there. So if you fail, you will buy more plants. And remember, if you can kill your plants, you're going to buy more plants, and that's what they want. If you can kill your fish, you're going to buy more fish, and you're going to replace them. That's what the market wants. Anyone who is successful, somebody like me, who doesn't buy plants or doesn't buy fish, I'm no good to an aquarium store. I'm going to come in once in a gray moon to maybe look what's going on. Oh, how's your tank doing? It's doing great. I don't know. I can't buy anything. They don't want that. So if you think about it real hard, nobody cares whether you really are successful. They pretend they do, but really they don't, because you don't make money if people are successful. And since in 3 years' time, most people drop out of the hobby, that means you just bought a lot of equipment, tanks, and everything else. They made their money off of you. That's it. So that's my thought on it, that basically, if you're successful, they're not going to make money off of you. If your plants are successful, they're not going to make money off of you. Your fish are successful, they're not going to make money off of you. This has to be a hobby where everything becomes expendable. It has to be designed that way. You can't have something like the anoxic filter, for example. You can't have a filter that will last 30 years and not clog up, and you can still use it 30 years from now. You can't have that. You got to make things so they have to be replaced. You don't make money off of products that continuously last forever. There's no money into it. You know, there just isn't. It's got to be made so you as the hobbyist will rebuy it over and over again. So that's my 2 cents on it. That's why I think what I'm teaching you here is so against and so much misinformation out there today, and people acting stupid like, I've never heard that. That's something new to me, anoxic filtration. I've never heard that. Of course, because they don't want you to use it. Because if it's that successful and it's something that doesn't have to replace, except maybe once every 30 years, where's the money at? There is no money. And that's the point I'm trying to bring up. So basically, what we're doing with our aquarium is basically what was said back in 1986 from the Germans. It's basically what we're doing. We're following their lead, but the only difference is we have a plenum versus them putting it directly on the bottom of the aquarium. And as you got, and like I told you, Undergravel filters were being phased out during that time period because they had changed them so much. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time, I'm working on a video for the 90-gallon because it will be a year old. It'll be interesting to see how much plant growth has happened and everything with that. But I hope you understand why I advocate iron. And like I said, 99% of what goes in my tank is iron. Basically, that's it. So until next time, this is Dr. Novak. Thank you very much for watching. And don't forget to subscribe. And we'll have more informative videos for you on planted aquariums, because that seems to be the route that now most people have gone, with planted aquariums versus an aquarium with plastic plants. So until next time, happy fish keeping.